Hi, my name is Qureshi, and today I will be showing you a use case, which is a very common request, how to encrypt payloads. And if you are calling a REST API, which is encrypted data, how do you decrypt it? So in Oracle Integration Cloud, we can do this using another OCI service called OCI Vault. So what is this use case all about? When we are working with third-party systems, especially banking systems, payment gateways, there is many times a requirement that the payload that you are sending, it should be encrypted. It should be encrypted using a certain key. And how do you do that when you are creating an integration using OIC? In that regard, there is a service called OCI Vault Service inside OCI, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. This is a management service that stores and manages master encryption keys and secrets for secure access to resources and using different key shapes, like it supports AES, which is a symmetric key, which you can use to encrypt and decrypt data. RSA keys, which are asymmetric, where you use a key pair, a public key as well as a private key. You can use this to encrypt, decrypt the data as well as sign the payload. And we have ECDSA, which is again an asymmetric key, but this is purely used for signing payload. So depending on your requirement, you can actually use an OCI Vault service to create these keys, or if you have been provided a key that you need to use this key to encrypt or decrypt the data, you can import these inside OCI Vault. OCI Vault Service provides different APIs to manage the key, creating keys, rotating keys, creating new versions. But in this scenario, we would be mainly focusing on two APIs, which is how do we use the API to encrypt the data as well as decrypt the data. This video is not about OCI Vault. This is about how I can use OCI Vault from Oracle Integration Cloud for this purpose. So if you want to learn more about OCI Vault, please go to the documentation and see how it can benefit you. Now, as I will be using Oracle Integration Cloud Service, and as you know, it provides a number of adapters. In this use case, I will be basically using a REST adapter because I will be using the OCI REST APIs to, again, encrypt and decrypt the data. So my focus today is just to use show you how you can use the REST adapter to connect with Vault APIs and perform these tasks. We will together develop two integrations. One, assemble integrations to encrypt the data, and the other one is to decrypt the data. Before I go ahead with the Oracle Integration Cloud, let's look at OCI Vault Service. How do you can find it and how you can go and create a key. So this is OCI Vault Service. When you go on the menu in Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, there inside identity and security, we have this service called Key Management and Secret Management. Inside that is the Vault Service. Now, creating a vault is as simple. You click on create, you just provide which compartment the vault is getting created and what is the name of the vault. I already have a vault created. Now, one of the interesting things about this is while you have vault in one compartment, you can create keys in a different compartment as well. But once the vault is created, one of the key things that we need to get from here is the cryptographic endpoint. This is the endpoint that we will be using for our APIs. When we call the encrypt, this is what we need to use. Management endpoint is for APIs when we are actually managing this vault. So we need to use cryptographic endpoint. You can have OCI Vault Service in a private, virtual private as well. Now, I have a different compartment. It's my compartment. So I will go and create a key. So when I create a key, I provide the compartment. There are two different protection modes. I will HSM and software. I'm using a software. And let's call this key as demo key. As you can see, there are different shapes available. AES, which is, as I said, symmetric, RSA, ECDSA. I'm just using AES. And there are different key shapes and lengths. Depending on the key, it will provide different options. So if I select RSA, it starts from 2048, goes up to 4096. But for this demo purpose, I'm just going ahead with 256. If I need to import an external key, I can use this import external key option and then follow the path. So let's create this key. It will take a few minutes for it to create the key. While it's doing that, let me show you a couple of other things. One is I have written a reference architecture on this topic, which will give you a little bit more information about symmetric keys, asymmetric keys, key algorithms, and how from OIC you can perform. And at the bottom of it, you will find other resources where there are examples showing you step-by-step guide how to go ahead and create. In the Vault Key APIs, because this is the next thing that we will be using. So let's have a look. What are the kind of APIs that are available? In our case, we can see there is decrypt key data, there is private endpoint related key summary, and so on. But we will be starting with encrypt data API. So you can see, as I mentioned, we will use the cryptographic endpoint, and this is the URI, which we need to use to call. There are certain things that we need to pass, but it's very simple. It is the key ID. So this is the OCID value of the key that we have created. So when we are going to pass the payload, it will use that particular key to encrypt the data. So we need to give a key ID OCID value and a plain text, but this plain text needs to be in base64 format. So we will see in Oracle Integration Cloud how we can achieve that. And from the response perspective, if you see the responses, we will receive a ciphertext, which is the encrypted data. Similarly, we will use the decrypt API, where the parameters are, again, we can pass key ID, we can pass key version ID if we are doing the rotation, and we pass the ciphertext, and it will give us the plain text of that encrypted value. And since we are passing the base64 to encrypt, it will give us the base64 format, so we can decode base64, and we'll see how that happens in OIC. So let's see. During this time, the key has been enabled. So this is my demo key. There is the version, and here is the OCID value that I need to copy. So I will just copy this because I will be needing it later on in my integration, but I can come back and copy it again. Okay, now this is Oracle Integration Cloud. I am inside a project. So I have created an HQ encryption project, and I have already created two connections. The first connection, which is a REST trigger, it is a simple trigger because my API that I'm creating is a REST-based API. So I'm passing, security. It's a trigger-based. It can be called by OAuth or basic auth. And this is the OCI Vault connection, right? Now, when you create a REST API, when you're calling the REST API of within OCI, we have two options. One is using the OCI signature version 1, and the other is we can use OCI service invocation. So service invocation requires RPST setup, and there is a blog you can find out how to configure it. In this scenario, I've used the OCI signature version 1, where we need to provide certain values. We need to upload the key. And again, there is a blog available which will guide you how to set this up. In the documentation, in the video, we will provide you these links and how to go about it. Okay. Once the connections has been established, let's create our first integration. I will be creating a app-driven integration. So I click Add, I go to Create Integration, I select Application, and let's give it a name. Let's call it Encrypt Data. So now let's use the trigger for the trigger. Let's just call it data. I am getting the encrypted value. Let's use in this scenario get, and I will pass the values as a parameter. So let's do that. And in the URI, I can say encrypt, and I can pass the template parameter by using this. Okay. So you can see by putting these curly brackets, it knows that this is a template parameter. Continue. So here I can see that the template variable message has been set up and its data type is string, which is what I want. Let's create a response. So if I go, I want this response to be in JSON sample, inline. So original message as well as encrypted message. Continue. Finish. So my trigger has been set up. Now I want to call the encrypt API. So in that regards, I will come over here, call this connection, which is the OCI Vault one. And I can look into the API, and this is mainly encrypt. Okay, so I just need this. And this is a post, so which is fine. I'll use post here. Okay. I will configure a request payload as well as a response payload. And this is encrypt. I need to give it an endpoint name. So the payload is JSON sample. It basically needs a key ID as well as the plain text. So I've just already copied this here. So let's take it from here. So key ID and plain text. And in the response, it is JSON sample, and that's just a ciphertext. So I'll just take that response from here. So my adapter request response has been configured. Now the only thing left for me is to do the mapping. So the trigger, the message that is coming, I want to pass that as a plain text. But as I remember from the documentation, when I pass this, I need to convert this into base 64. So let's see how do we do that. So let's first create a target node. And here we have a lot of functions available. I can find the base 64 function. And I can see there are certain functions which is decode. But here in this scenario, I want to do an encode, right? I want to convert that into base 64. And what do I want to convert is the message which is coming as part of the payload, right? So good. That has been validated. And I need to pass a key ID. So let's copy that key ID from the vault that we had created. That's all looks good. I'm validating this mapping just to make sure the mapping is correct. So the message comes and I'm able to call the encrypt. Now let's do the final. So I want this output to come as a response of this REST API. So in the response, I've got original message. So original message goes from the message which is coming there. And encrypt response, this is what I had called the encrypt API, and its response is the cipher text, so that's coming as encrypted message. And I just perform this mapping. That's My integration is almost complete. I just need to add the tracking variables. So in this scenario, I'm just using the message which I am passing as the tracking. Right now, this is an example just to show you how you can call the encrypted API and encrypt the data. Now, in your actual scenario, once you have encrypted the data, you might have another third-party API, or you want to store data into a database, but in the encrypted format. So the next step for you would be to call that API and use this encrypted text, right? So let's activate this integration. Okay, let's test it. So I can click on these three dots, run, and I use the inbuilt tester of Oracle Integration Cloud. Here is the message. Let me put my name, or let's do hello world. Okay, run. So, okay, so what I can see that the original message is this, and it has provided an encrypted value for me as well. I can track the integration, and I can see that the request came in, it called the encrypt API within the OCI Vault API, and I got the response back. Okay, this integration looks good. Now let's create a similar integration, but this time rather than encrypt, we will be doing a decrypt. So let's create another integration. Click create, application driven. This one is decrypt data, create. Again, I want to keep it a very simple trigger-based REST API. So let's call that data again. And here it's decrypt, it's post. So this time, last time I used get for template, but I want to use JSON payload. So continue. In this case, JSON sample. And in the sample, all I need to pass is the message that I want to decrypt, right? So let's take that. Yeah, I just want to pass the ciphertext. Okay. So this is the message, which is the encrypted message. I want that to go ahead. And similarly, like last time, I want the encrypted message as well as the original message, or unencrypted message in this case, right? So for the response. So I will do it. This looks good. So I'll just copy that here. Right, so plain text and the ciphertext which I'm passing, right? So that's my trigger setup for this integration. Okay. Now, again, to decrypt, I will use my other connection, which is the OCI Vault connection. And this time I will be calling the decrypt API rather than encrypt, of course. So decrypt data. We can again look from the documentation. This is the decrypt API, and it's simply decrypt. So let's use that in the URI. And again, it's a post. So we will use post. And it requires to configure request and response. So we will do that. It's a JSON sample. Here. And this is, we are passing the ciphertext with the key ID. So like that. So we have the ciphertext and we have the key ID. It's good. And the response, it provides a response which is the unencrypted data. But remember, the default that comes, because we are sending base 64, it would be base 64. So we will need to decode that to see exactly what it is, right? So in this manner, my integration calling has been set up. So now final thing is to map. So I add it. Okay, so I've got two elements, ciphertext and key ID. Request, I'm getting the ciphertext, I'm passing that ciphertext, so that's one-to-one mapping. And for the key ID, again, from the vault, I can just copy the OSID and I can provide that over here. Okay, I can validate this information. This mapping looks good. Now, on the response, I need to see what was decrypted. So we'll do that final mapping, response of this API. I've got plain text and ciphertext. Ciphertext is coming from the request, so that's one-to-one mapping. For the plain text, this time, last time we encoded base 64, so we go into the functions. Let's search for base 64 again. While these are available in advance, I use search functionality that works very nice. So I can decode base 64, and what do I need to decode? The response which is coming from decrypt data API. So this is the plain text, and I need to decode this. Okay. So let's validate. So again, my integration is almost complete. I just need to set the tracking variable. So I'm using the ciphertext that I'm passing as the tracking variable, and that looks good to me. So we are now out. We will activate this integration, and let's activate. That's activated. So now let's go again, encrypt to the encrypt API that we created first and pass some values. So let's call it demo how to encrypt data. So I'm using this text, run. It went and it has encrypted. So this is the encrypted text. So I'm just copying it. Now I'll pass this into the decrypt data API, and let's see if it is able to decrypt it successfully. So this was here, and let's run it. Yeah, it looks good. So it says how to encrypt data. This is the value that I had used to, that I had encrypted. This time, because I'm using the same key IDs, using the same key, it is able to encrypt as well as decrypt the data, right? Again, I can look into the activity stream, how the integration worked. I got the data, it called the decrypt API this time, and the response, right? So in today's session, I want to keep it very simple, but the main focus of this was we receive a lot of requests. How can I encrypt and decrypt the payloads? In Oracle Integration Cloud, you can easily do that. Use OCI Vault Service. Use the functionality that OCI Vault provides. If you have external keys, you can import the keys as long as they meet the format and what we are supporting in Vault. And using these APIs, it's very simple for you to encrypt as well as decrypt the data. There are recipes available for this as well. You can use the recipes too, but I wanted to show you step-by-step guide. I hope you liked the session. Thank you.